Hey there, folks. So, last episode we started off our inventory system by creating our basic UItem class, which is going to be used to define all of our core logic for all inventory items. This episode we're going to be moving things a little further forward. So, in here, you can see this is the one we went through, and I removed all the highlighting, but we went through and determined, well, we no longer need this non-equipable intermediate class. We can go straight through from our item base through to our other three. Now, with that, we did establish also in last episode that our item base, our equipable, our handheld, and our consumable in this case are classes that they themselves are not going to be blueprintable. We did throw that in there, as you can see right here, as a way to test within the engine. But really, the main focus of these classes are going to be item based, equipable, handheld, and consumable are going to be for data and logic, where the more specific ones are actually going to be the blueprints. So, what we're going to set up this episode, just because it's something to keep things moving and keep things partially in the editor, we're actually going to work on this junk class. This one is very basic. It has no direct use for the player character. Like, it's not something they can wear, it's not something they can wield, it's not something they can consume. But this is going to represent things like, as I was using in the last episode in Fallout 4, you have things like the desk fans that you can pick up that to the character directly have zero use, but they're usable for the parts that they contain. So we're going to start in this junk class because that's actually going to be the class that is going to be used for, let's get this out of the way, all of these salvage item information. Because your player, well, maybe in your game you might want to, but in my game, and sorry, that wasn't meant to be condescending. I understand robot games, things like that, but you're not going to want your player to eat things like springs, copper wiring, circuit boards, stuff like that. Again, as I was just saying, like, could have a robot game where that's a resource. In my game, it's not. So that junk class is going to be where this information comes from. So that's going to be your copper, that's going to be your circuits, your iron, things like that. So also, I just want to confirm I did go through and I validated that T subclass of is actually the correct use there. I'm not sure why the editor, I didn't like it. I think it was because that was a live code change and that they don't always work. So that is something else I can recommend, as I found with Unreal Engine, is though you may be using a live code update, doesn't always work. So with that though, folks, I'm going to just quickly build the engine just to show you. It should be all built. I say that and it's creating files. I don't think I changed anything since the last time I built. Oh, there we go. 5 succeeded. There's must be something with configuration stuff. Anyway, so we'll launch the editor quickly, and we're just going to go through and create a new class. And this one's actually going to be really quick. We're probably going to start branching into one of the other classes because I just realized there's almost nothing we need to do to this. So now, while this launches, one thing I did say this is going to be using the junk object type, but we have it listed as UItem base. Now, there is potentially going to be some situations where you want things that are salvageable into non-junk components. Just trying to think what we could have there. Off the top of my head, I can't even think of an example, but I know there was a reason. I had thought about this for quite some time before I decided how to lay out those classes, and I know there was a reason I wanted the how salvage items to be, well, to use the U item base, because then it could be anything. Like technically using U item base, you could have something harvest into a higher level. So you could have a iron tube harvest into a gun, if you wanted to. I'm just trying to think now. Actually, I can't justify any reason why. So we'll actually probably fix that in this episode as well. But anyways, the editor is taking quite some time to load up for some reason. So I'm going to pause the video and I'll be back as soon as it's ready. Alright, so we're back in the editor here. I'm just going to pull over the content browser. Go into our C++, our project, public, and because we're working in this new folder location, items, open that up. Now here we're going to right click on the item base and we're going to create a C++ class derived. And I'm just going to call this junk item base. And everything else is still left as is. The path you want to keep in items, and the header and source file are automatically put into the public and private for you because we have the class type. So with that, I'm not quite sure. I thought I could do a full episode on this because literally this is it. There's two changes we're going to be making here. So the first one is going to be blueprint. It's what we have in item base. Blueprintable? Yeah, blueprintable. It's being slow because it's still running everything, but I'm trying to keep things moving. So the junk type or junk class, again, just while this is running in the background, I'll pull this over. So this junk class is literally, it's for all of the, well, junk objects in the world. That's why I use the term junk for the name. It's for everything that does not have a specific use to the characters, be it player or NPC, but it does have a wider use overall. So that's things like nails. Well, nails do potentially have some use depending how you think about it, but nails, boards, as I mentioned, wire, circuitry, things like that. And all of that is, they're just something that doesn't have a singular use on its own. Now, I know we do have what I've called a resource item, but that's things like bullets, or fuel for, let's say, a chainsaw. I was trying to justify why I have this line for melee. And that's what these lines here represent. It's like this is an end result class that these know about. That's why they have the dotted line instead of the solid line. And melee, not so much. I put that there for the potential of, say, a chainsaw because it needs fuel. But you've got things like ammunition. So the ranged would need a resource of ammunition. When actually I'm going to have that double, it's going to be a circular thing here. So my intent is ranged, depending on the weapon, are going to have a magazine. The magazine is then going to have ammunition. And I'm sorry if I'm using the wrong terms for all the gun aficionados out there. I'm not a gun enthusiast, so I can never remember if it's magazine or if it's clip or whatever the terms are used. So I do apologize if I'm using the wrong ones there. So anyway, so with that, there we go. This is now, yeah, we can stop debugging because we haven't done anything there. So we are going to do two other changes, though. I was just thinking about it. So we need to grab this include from the source for junk items. And we're going to throw that in the source for our item base. No, no. What are we doing? We don't need to do that. Or do we? No, we don't. Item base. So we are actually going to change this to U junk item. And the whole reason for that is I cannot think of a reason. Windows Defender is still running, isn't it? Yes, that is why. And it is not letting me save for whatever reason because it's still scanning files. Well, anyways, while this is doing its BS in the background, so we can remove this blueprintable from our U item base because we no longer want to be able to create blueprints. There we go. We can save finally. And the reason why I decided to change my mind on this is I genuinely cannot think of a reason to allow things to scrap down to something other than this. Now, should that ever happen, it's actually a very easy fix. Literally, because junk item is derived from item base, all we would need to do, we would do, come on, right button, junk, and then that would fix it. You wouldn't need to update any of your blueprints or anything like that that you may have done because, unless you're wanting to add additional salvage items, obviously, but you're not going to need to fix any of your blueprints. That is still going to work. But for now, I want to leave it as a junk item because I want to leave that restriction in place. And I just realized I missed some properties from here. So, a couple other things that we know every single item are going to have. And this is actually a big one. And now this is actually going to be dependent on how your game is going to be set up for carry capacity. But in my case, I do want an item weight. What is it? There's another one. Clamp? No. Oh, let me find this here. It is clamp, man. IntelliSense just wasn't pulling it up. Property though. So this is, again, I mentioned in a couple of other episodes where you've seen me doing this. It's a lot of what programming is. You're literally just sitting here going, "Oh, what's this? What's the answer to this? What's the answer to this?" And that, sadly, or fortunately, is actually quite a lot of programming. But anyway, so what we've done here, just to explain, so I've added in a U property to edit default only. Obviously, that means you just can only edit the blueprint. You can't edit it at runtime. Blueprint read only. Meta allow private access is true because this is a protected class. The reason being is we want all child classes to still be able to work with these. Otherwise, if as soon as we created, say, a junk item, these wouldn't be available to it. So we need that allow private access with protected. Otherwise, it throws errors. And what I've done here is clamp to minimum. And that's simply because you do not want an item to have a negative weight because then carrying it would mean it's easier. Now, I understand you could have things like there was a little thing I seen on the internet not long ago. Somebody had a helium balloon tied to their, and I'm talking a decent sized one, helium balloon tied to their backpack, and that would work. But for situations like that, you would want to create, if you wanted to include that, you'd want to provide, do that as something else. You'd want that to have some other form of logic to generate the negative weight that that's doing. So you'd want the balloon itself to have, say, a weight of 10, but then when it's equipped, it would have a weight offset as an attribute or a side effect, like you've seen things. I'm thinking games at this point like WoW or well, even Fallout, where you'd put on the legendary breastplate or chest piece, and all of a sudden it's giving you damage to mutants, something like that. So we've got that set up there. We've changed that over to the U junk. So with that, the next thing we're going to do is I'm just going to move around this in a clockwise pattern. We're going to start on our consumables. So with that, we're going to just do a quick build here. And this one might take a little bit because we have done some changes. There you go, it's building 6 items. So I will pause the video, and as soon as the build is done, I will be back. Alright, so we're in the editor now. Build finished fine, no issues. Apparently my content browser doesn't want to move though. So the next item we're going to do is, as I mentioned, the consumable. This consumable, just the base one. And then from there, we'll start adding some actual functionality in. But so with that though, from our graph, we established this is going to derive from an item base. So create a item base, C++ class derived from. Why are you being so slow today? I'm going to reload. And it is doing the live code. We can just say yes to that. So we've now got our 2 derived classes, the junk item base. We can close out of this one. As I mentioned, it has 0 further code requirements. Literally, it's here's some items. The reason why we are not using just this pure item base for that is we want to make sure, trying to think how to explain this in terms that it's going to make sense to somebody who doesn't have my brain. If for whatever reason you need to make some changes to those junk items, like you want to, again, I'll use examples from last episode, Project Zomboid, you can equip pretty much everything in your hands, even though it may have 0 physical use. Say partway down the line, you decide you want to, and by partway down the line, I mean through the development timeline. Partway through the development timeline, you decide junk items are going to now have this additional feature that they didn't have before. And instead of having to go through this whole, okay, well, we need to reparent them over here, you have the alternate option of you just start adding to the junk item. But again, as I was explaining last episode, the non-green classes, again, not non-equipable, we removed that one from being needed. But the non-green ones are classes you do not want to directly create blueprints of, because they are nothing but data or background logic. And you want the green ones to be the ones that are actually ones you create instances of with blueprints. So, all right. So, with the consumable, you do have a couple of options there. You could go through and I'm trying to think how to. Trying to think what this you want to do for this. So anyway, so you okay, sorry, I was just thinking how I'm trying to remember how I designed this in my head. So with that, right now, this is all just going to be sort of gray box code, but you could have something like enum stat affected float amount. And what that would be is you'd say, okay, this item is going to affect your hunger, and it's going to give you 50 hunger back. It's going to affect your thirst. It's going to give you 50 thirst back, and so on and so forth. And just with that component, stat line component, that would be these guys here, core stat. Now, there is different ways you could go about it. As with the graph here, let me just pull this back up. We have different ones. You have food, you have water, you have medical. And I'm thinking about this, and this is why, like I said, it's you want to go through and do a diagram like this, but then you want to actually walk through it a second time, or as some developers will know, what's called rubber duck debugging if you're having problems you can't figure out. Because I'm just sitting here thinking, well, we don't actually need these. This could be the blueprint class here, because like, well, every single one of these is going to have the same base effect. Like when you boil it all down, it's going to be, I'm going to target a particular stat or stats, and we are going to adjust it by an amount. And I'm just thinking, okay, well, do I really need all of these? And the reason why I'm thinking yes, actually, I'm going to remove these because I just realized there's a reason why I did this. These two can become a singular item. Medical is going to be in its own. And I'm thinking for, again, I'm going to use Project Zomboid for anyone familiar with that as an example. Bandages. In that game, they instantly stop a bleed. Where you put a bandage on and your bleeding stops, but it doesn't recover your health, it doesn't adjust anything, so it's a status effect. Whereas food and water are a stat adjustment. So mentally, I was just thinking, yes, that explains it. However, that puts us into another situation where we can just do this and get rid of that one. So again, further things you can do as you're planning these out. I know when I did this graph, I sort of just threw things down. It's like, okay, this will work. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to use the consumable name to represent these two, and then we'll have a medical item, which will be its own thing. But anyways, because I know we're getting close to my new 30-minute timelines, let's get things moving here. So as you can see, we have enum class e core stat. We're actually going to use that. But over here, so what we want is actually something, we've been using these all over the place. So we need a struct. So use struct blueprint type. Struct f consumable stat adjustment. Generated ustruct body, and then these we want. Oh, they want these public or private. Well, these can be public because they're not going to be used anywhere else. So u property edit defaults only, blueprint read only, enum class e, what do we call it? E core stat. Tells you how good my brain is. E core stat. Get rid of the first two EC I put in there. Affected stat. U property. I'm going to actually just copy that one. float amount. Now the reason for this, yeah, actually I'm going to do this in an easier way. I don't want to potentially have missing, well no, because we don't, yeah, it does not need to know about all of this crap. I'll actually probably do that in the next episode, thinking about it. I'm going to do some cleanup. We have a lot of data types that are being, like, I've absentmindedly just thrown them into a class header file when they probably should be in their own data type folder. So bear with me. But anyways, back to this. So we have, no, it doesn't need the semicolon there. eCore stat not allowed, incomplete type. Let's do, yeah, that is what I thought was going to be the case. I'm going to end up, so everyone knows, I'm going to end up fixing this in the next episode because I do not want to be doing this, but for the sake of moving things along, I will. So we can get rid of that. Why are you now saying you can't? Unable to find class eCore stat. Don't tell me you can't, because it's right there. I'm going to ignore this one because it's just being a pain, because file structure. So what we want here, and the whole purpose for this, is T array, what do we call this? F consumable stat adjustment stat effects. Now what this is for, again, just because it's the only one that's coming to mind off the top of my head, think Project Zomboid, for those familiar with it. You have, or just foods in general. You don't even need to think in video game terms. You can think in real world terms. Like, let's take a watermelon, for example. You're eating that. It's going to provide you with both some cessation to hunger and some cessation to thirst. It's going to fill you up and it's going to give you some fluids. So you're going to want to be able to represent that. You don't want to have to say your watermelon only gives you food, or your watermelon only gives you water. So that is the reason for this here. So you could say, okay, it's going to affect your hunger and it's going to affect your thirst. And actually thinking about it, it might be better here for your own sanity and for ease, so you can't accidentally go, oh, it's going to affect your hunger. And you could, basically, to stop you from being able to add in hunger like 6 times here and having it all affect them. Actually, I'm going to completely redo what I just did here. So, tmap eCore stat, it's right there. Float. Stat adjustments. And we want to make this private because it's unique to the consumable item. However, U property, edit defaults only, blueprints read only. Oh yeah, and then meta. I hit my cap lock button. So, just to explain this a little though, because I know we mentioned, what was it? Item base, we wanted to clamp that. You don't want to do that with the brain does not want to work. You don't want to do that here with the amount, because let's say, trying to think what would be a good example. Coffee. Not sure most people know, but it's a diuretic and actually makes you thirstier drinking coffee. Your body wastes water to filter out the technically poisonous caffeine. I think that's the reasoning. Again, not a chemist, biologist, whatever. I'm a programmer, so I just know coffee actually makes you dehydrated. But for example, we don't have it in this setup, but let's say you had a stat for energy, and obviously stat for thirst and you drank coffee. Well, you want it to give it energy, but you want it to lower your thirst or make you thirstier. So you want your amount to be both positive and negative. I'm trying to think. That would actually be the only property in here, and I do realize I have missed a very important feature. So we've hit the 30-minute mark. However, we're going to add this one feature in, and then we'll carry on in the next episode to start getting some things finished up. And I'm actually going to hopefully remember to add in a couple of like static mesh and icons to use for our junk item. But anyways, what we want to do is go back to our item base, and then we want to add in a public section, virtual void on use, and we want to ATF character, no, that's class ATF character pointer color. I think it's pure virtual. Oh, okay, I'm trying to remember how you define that. UE5 C++ define pure virtual. Helps so I could spell. Pure virtual function or abstract is virtual function. Yeah, I know that. I want to know how it's defined specifically within a neural engine setup. U function virtual, or are you just saying declare it? There's no oh well, instead of wasting time, I'll dig into that off camera. So what this is here, U function. This is just creating the basic function that if you use an item in your inventory, this is what's going to get called. So just set that up in there. Item base, obviously we don't need to do anything. And the whole reason why I was looking for pure virtual is I wanted to make it so that we had to define it within, like absolutely had to define it here within consumable. But I can just do it this way. Now, also, I would just want to point out quickly before, because we're getting to my timer mark here, we don't need to add in U function blueprint callable here. The reason being is, oh, I just duplicated it instead of saving. You can, but we don't need to because it follows the same decorator information as to its original parent, which would be this one here. What are you saying? Blueprint callable. Oh, I can't spell. Fix that, and then that's probably going to say this doesn't need to be. Yeah, there you go. Override of the U function on use parent U item cannot have a U function declaration above it. It's the same as the original. So, and just get rid of that. So this automatically becomes blueprint callable. So, anyways, folks, we've hit that 35-minute mark in this case. We're going to end things here. Thank you for watching. Next episode, we're going to continue on with the inventory system. I understand we haven't actually started the inventory system itself, but we do need to get the base item information set up. So next episode, as I say, we're going to continue with our consumables, potentially add in our medical, just because that'll be the next one in our rotation. which should have been our first. And I'm going to see if I can track down a couple of items, like assets that we could use to start creating some junk items in the editor. But as always, thank you for watching, folks. Hopefully you've enjoyed and you found something useful. Also, as always, if you have any comments, questions, suggestions, concerns, please feel free to throw them in the comments below. I do try to respond to everything. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.